Welcome to the Career Guy Podcast, a chance to talk with different people and share stories about their careers and career paths, giving you an insightful look at different careers that do exist. Here's your host, Mickey Horvath.
This interview is with Kurt Villanueva, owner and founder of Audio Dreams Distributions and co-owner of the Audio Room located in Calgary, Alberta. Also, I would like to add, this video and audio for this podcast was recorded and edited by Sam from 404 Creative LBC. They solve critical challenges for nonprofits through strategic content. In this interview, we go through Kurt's life and how he developed his interest in audio equipment. We talk about his years at Montreal University. His experience in computer science and business are all shared. We go over his initial exposure working in retail in audio at the Future Shop. We talk about how he started and built Audio Dream Distributions, how he developed his relationships with the founders of the Audio Room, and how he established into being a co-owner of the store are all conveyed. This interview will appeal to anyone interested in audio as we cover the history and talk about the future of this industry. Entrepreneurs would be interested as there is many discussions on developing a business mindset. We talk about leadership, as Kurt is an example of someone who knows how to build community by establishing relationships. So with that, let's start off this interview as Kurt explains growing up with his family values.
So my parents are from the Philippines. They came here exactly for us and before we were born. They ended up in Manitoba first and decided that Alberta would probably be most likely the best future for their family.
What was the household like? What growing up in your household, what was it like?
Yeah, so we grew up. So my parents pretty much came here with nothing. Which of course was very difficult. My dad was working 2 jobs. And I was always just so used to it that we were in our household on any given time. We've always had at least 11 to 13 people living in about 1,100 square foot house. Yeah, it was, growing up, that was just something that I ended up getting used to. And all the way, I would say, up until I was in junior high, that was pretty much the normal. And we grew up in basically Whitehorn, in the northeast here of Calgary, and going to school, and during that time, especially in the North Sea, there's a lot of immigrants that were basically the majority, I would say, of the population there. And so a lot of these houses and a lot of people that I kind of grew up with, it was kind of normal to have these households that that housed either multi-generational and stuff like that. And especially in that time, these houses were quite small. So it was quite unique. And I just thought that was a normal way of life, kind of growing up in that.
I would gather that you grew up with a real sense of family value, though.
Yes, I did.
In a household like that.
Yes.
Where family was really tight and it mattered a lot.
And that's the thing, especially going to my parents, they really instilled that in us. Everything was always kind of about family and your circle around you. It was one of those things where, whether it was my uncle or my aunt, I had to treat them with utmost respect, and that you always help and take care of your family, and that was, and also too as my friends, and I think that's why today I have quite a large circle of friends too, because that's something that these connections is really what my dad made sure we pretty much instilled us, that it would really help us in the future, and that family dynamics. Yeah, we're very close, and it was funny because anytime we either had a time where, say, some of our family members would make that transition and move on to their house, and even now it's just, say, the 5 of us, the house would feel so empty. even though it was small, and it would actually feel weird. It would actually feel weird that we weren't surrounded with either family or very close friends during that time.
So you grew up with people around you all the time.
Yes, yeah, and yeah.
But what were your interests? Aside from just growing up with a family around you, what were some of your interests? Getting into high school and what interested you? What did you do well at?
One thing is fishing.
Okay.
I always really liked fishing. Was one thing I started at quite a young age, and oddly enough, home audio and home theater. I just was really drawn into the whole thing about sound production. And it actually started in one Christmas. One Christmas Eve, I believe I was probably about 12 years old at that time. My cousin, he just wanted to show me off. He wanted to show me his new stereo system. I think at that time it was like a Boston acoustic system. It was, when I think about it back then, it was good, but it wasn't great. And him too. That family partly used to live with us, and he was really also into stereos, and I actually to kind of thank him for that night. Like, we already had a pretty decent stereo in our house. It was a Sanssouci stereo system. But he's like, no, you got to listen to this. And like, I just got it and I saved up money and I bought this. So he drove me to his house, and then we had a listen. And after that day, that was probably end up one of my biggest passion is music and sound reproduction of music.
So I'm just curious, because I grew up the same way, and I had this massive record collection. I collected records, and then when CDs were becoming a lot more popular, I bought a lot of CDs. I'm assuming you did the same thing.
Yes. So what was difficult for me was being able to afford it, though, and I think that was the problem. So the good thing is, my parents at a young age, we had bought a stereo, and they really saved up. I think I would like to remember and this was during the 80s, they spent about probably over $2,000. And it was during this time, my parents, they were working 16 hours a day. So when I think about it, I was just shocked that they were able to even purchase something like that. The problem is we actually couldn't really afford to buy the software and the music and the albums. So we'd go out there and we would just collect basically as much as we could. And then the moment, I would say, when I reached high school was the chance where now I can start affording CDs. And it was during that time where I would just start buying CDs so I can, with the very little money that I did have, that I either got from my parents or anything like that. But yeah, that's something that I really had to save up just to even buy the music itself.
No, I can relate. I can understand that. Yeah. But this is all during your high school years. So coming out of high school, obviously you were very interested in audio.
Yes.
And you said fishing, but with audio, I'm assuming, I'm just reading into this, you're a technical kind of person.
Yes, yeah.
So coming out of that, though, too, like most of us coming out of high school, we're thinking about what we want to do with our lives. So what did you do? What happened to you when you came out of high school?
So I would say even during high school, I really already knew what I wanted to do.
Okay.
One thing, what it would be, was going to own a business. I knew that at a very young age already. I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to own my own company and basically be self-employed and work for myself. And I think I probably realized that when I was about, going back when I was about 6 or 7 years old, at a really, really young age. So, and I could tell the story how I got into it, but basically, my parents, of course, in order to try to make money, they were trying everything. So when I was about 5 years old, they opened a leather good place at the flea market. And they said, and I came up with an idea, I'm like, oh, Mom, Dad, can I sell some toys and just sell some of the toys I don't need, and maybe I can just get money and use that to buy other toys. And so they said, okay. So they let me set up a little section in the little leather goods store at the flea market that was my own, kind of almost like Kurt's little used toy store. And I started selling these toys, and like G.I. Joe and Transformers, which I probably should have kept because they're worth a lot of money now. But I ended up selling them, and then I started. What I started doing was my neighborhood friends. I started asking them I said, you know what? Why don't you? I'll take some of your toys. I'll sell them. I keep part of it, and then you keep part of it, And I didn't even know that was even the term, that consignment back then. I just thought of this idea where I'm like, oh, this would be really, I was like, this would be really cool way to kind of make money. And that's how I would get product to sell at this little toy store thing that I had. And I remember the day there was this, and I still won't forget it, and I wish I had it, but it was a gray and red safe. And I still remember the day, they're mostly dollar bills, maybe a few $5 bills, and you can slip it. There's a little slot on the top where you can slip it through. And I just noticed that the bills, they're kind of, you're kids, you're kind of crumpling them up. But it filled to the top in probably this little 10 by 10 safe. And then I remember opening it and all these dollar bills kind of flooding out. And then I said, this is what I want to do. I said, I want to do something like this. And then it turned into in junior high, I was selling ping pong rackets and all this different kind of stuff. But for me, I really already knew at a young age.
So that's interesting you point that out. So growing up, aside from just being around a lot of people, your family and whatnot, it sounds to me like you developed your entrepreneur spirit from your parents, because you mentioned that your parents were trying a lot of different things to make a living.
Yes.
And you got incorporated into that just from, the flea market and going in junior high, you learned to, well, for lack of better words, be the middleman or the front man, retail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that was correct. Yeah. So it really stemmed from them. And my dad back home in the Philippines, he always had a really strong, I would say, business sense. He was a university professor, but the thing is, he always had businesses, which I think that kind of stuck to as well with me, and knowing that what he had back home and actually what he left behind to come here to Canada for a better life for us. But I always remember, and he always told me, he told me, business, his passion was also business and school. And I think especially the business part really kind of stuck to me.
Okay, so two things that are sticking to my mind. It was probably in your genes.
Yes, could be. Yeah,
probably
for
stuck
sure.
in your genes, and this is what you saw growing up.
Yes.
You saw that business sense growing up. So then coming out of high school, what did you do? With this business sense, with the strong family values and a real kind of interest in audio, what did you decide to pursue coming out of high school?
So right out of high school, I decided to go post-secondary, and that was the time I went to Mount Royal. And as a part-time job, so I did work for my dad when I was in, even I think starting even late junior high. But what I wanted to do while I went to post-secondary, my dream was to work in the audio industry. Something selling audio or just working in there, that's what I wanted to do, because this was my passion. So what I did was I went to all the different hi-fi stores, similar to like here at the time, and I was young, and most of them were just like kind of like, beat it, kid, like what do you like? No, we're not going to hire you. One thing is you can only work part-time, and you just don't belong. Basically, they think that I wouldn't be qualified. So then I started pursuing all the chain stores, like the Future Shop, the Visions at the time, and I finally, A&B Sound, that's the one I really would have been my top choice during that time. But I was able to get a job at Future Shop. And so that kind of was the first step in me even learning more about the industry, was actually a Future Shop. And it's funny because Future Shop now is known, it's unfortunately they're no longer around, it's mainly just Best Buy now. But during that time, it was a lot different. We had to wear a suit. It's funny, as Sam knows. So Sam I actually worked with at Future Shop, and that's how I met Sam here. So when I worked at Future Shop, it was way different. We had to wear a suit there. It was and the sales program that they had there, and teaching us how to sell properly, how to deliver into customer experience, is I think carrying that forward is part of the success today. Yeah.
So you definitely get your feet wet working at Future Shop. And for people that are listening to this, maybe they're a little too young, Future Shop was, I guess you could say, a mid-tier store that sold high-end or stereo equipment, stereo and audio equipment.
Yes, and Future Shop, when I started, probably about a year after, actually cut, especially for a place of Future, actually got quite high-end. And that's, I mean, we had to go in there, and I still caught that era where you had no choice to wear a suit every day. And what a lot of people don't realize is during that time, Future Shop started to be a little bit higher end. There was a speaker, the Infinity IL60s, and this was back in the late 90s. We were selling that speaker for $11,500 in Future Shop. So we actually had speakers that were quite expensive back then. And yeah, it was, and it actually, and even knowing how people decipher between picking different speakers and what makes a higher end speaker I was able to really do that at Future Shop and kind of figure out just the normal sales process and how to help a customer, guide them through and educate them through different sounds of why you move up into higher end product and stuff like that. So it was pretty, yeah, it was a good learning experience.
It sounds like it. At the same time, though, too, let's get into your years at Mount Royal as well.
Yeah.
I'm interested about that, though, too, because, post-secondary is important for a lot of people.
Yes.
So what did you learn first of all, what did you take and what did you learn?
So my first thing I took was computer science, because that was actually another passion, too, as well. So I thought, basically, when I took computer science, I thought I would want to do a business in computers maybe at that time. Because, when you think about computers, there's just a lot of opportunities and creative part that I think that you can go into there. But that quickly changed after about a couple of years. And the reason why was, even though I did enjoy it, when I was sitting there in the lab, and I remember I just couldn't compile this one program. And it was now 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I finally figured it out. I kind of looked around and I said, the things, I can't be doing this. I need to be interacting with other people, like all the time. And then that's when I switched to business. And it was during that time that I switched to business, and along with Future Shop and a friend of mine that I met is how I opened my first company in audio. And it's funny because at that time, while I was learning business, and I'm very glad I got to take it. Actually, one of the teachers there, or the profs there, was Nenshi too as well. He was teaching on the marketing side.
Okay.
So I did get to learn quite a bit on him, and it was weird. It was weird how it all came together. So I met a friend who also worked at Future Shop, and we went to school at Mount Royal too as well. And he owned an audio company. Sorry, his uncle owned an audio company back home in the UK called Orel. Basically, it was Orel Audio, and there were some really good engineers, and even his uncle was quite known in the industry. And then I started thinking about, I remember asking him, like, you know what? I'm a broke student, but I love this stuff. Can you sell me something at your uncle's raw cost? Like, just whatever it cost him to make it, would he be willing to do this for one time and just sell to me so I could have a really high-end amp, and I'd be able to possibly maybe even afford that. And then after that, it really, it's neat because it led into, said, you know what? Why don't we distribute this in Canada? So while we went to school, we came up with a business plan. And it's funny, is because a lot of people don't know that, we repurposed that for all our assignments while we're taking business in school. And so what we would do is we would come up with a business plan, not only for ourselves, but we were also, when we had a project, a lot of times you're doing so many marketing plans and business plans, and when you're taking business in school, we would submit those. So it was good. It was a dual purpose, and we end up opening. Both of us together opened was called Audio Dream Distributions at the time, and we were able to bring in a lot of really good brands. And at the time, we even had seeked out investment, which we were able to secure investment to as well, and kind of just start the whole thing. And then that's a whole other story of the whole process and the journey of that. But it was, let's just say, it was an incredible journey for sure.
A couple of things are coming to my mind that I really want to harp on, or I just want to bring up. Well, because again, this is a podcast about careers.
Yeah.
I like the way you said, or I just want to emphasize, is when you talked about computer science, and you realized, I think you said it was about second year into it, that this wasn't for you. A lot of people go into something like that, and the way you worded it, it was 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. You were writing a piece of software, and you're trying to compile it, or in other words, you were trying to get it going. And you realize that this wasn't for you. And hats off to you for recognizing that. Because a lot of people hack it out. And again, a lot of people stick to something that maybe they don't like. And you recognize the fact that this wasn't working. Yes. With that said though too, you realize what was working in your life. Which is really interesting. You like the business side of it. And growing up, you mentioned you had that entrepreneur spirit. And you knew business was something that was a good niche for you. And I like the way I'm intrigued, or I like the way you said the fact that you liked audio, and then somebody that you were working with at Future Shop, their uncle owned, if I remember right.
Yeah, Orel. Yep.
Yeah, owned it, and you got an amp for base cost, but at the same time, it sort of sparked something inside of you going, well, hey, look, maybe we could sell some of this stuff.
Yes, yeah.
So, in conjunction with your schooling, because you mentioned that too, that was actually quite neat how you took your schooling, and at the same time you were trying to set up this business part-time, and you're kind of you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
You're applying your school knowledge to your business knowledge as well to get your business off the ground. I'm curious though, and were you nervous, or were you just so young, and for lack of better words, maybe naive, that you just went ahead with things and you just said, well, whatever happens, happens?
I was. Yeah, I really was quite, I was really quite scared during that time, because also too, the moment you're starting to take investment and stuff like that from other people, it changes kind of everything. And I think one thing that was most fearful to, at the time, I was young, and I knew that in order to make a business, you had to take risk and you had to take sacrifice. I think the thing that worried me the most was actually my parents. They did not want me to take this kind of risk. They wanted me to finish school first, even though my dad had businesses back home, but because he was also a university professor, school was the priority for me to finish. So it was more the fear of disappointment. I think that was really difficult. And yeah.
How did you balance the two? I mean, so this is interesting, because a lot of people struggle with this as well, or younger folks. You don't want to disappoint your parents. And coming from the background that you came, your parents are immigrants, they worked really hard. They probably had to help you go through school.
Exactly, yes.
So you didn't want to disappoint them. So what was going on in your head to figure out which way was the right way to do things for you?
Yeah, it was, well, to tell you the truth, at first I didn't really tell them. I think that was the best thing to do, was just not mention anything to them. And I was gonna kind of get to a certain point where I kind of got the foundation laid and everything grow to actually make this into a business. Actually, when I told them, and at that time, I did do my best. I tried to juggle both, to also make them happy, and also too, I wanted to finish. I wanted to finish and see it all the way through, and that's just the type of person I am. I just really want to see it through, and I want to finish, and I know going to school, there's a lot of things you can learn from. So I really just tried to juggle both and find that balancing act. There was just at a point where it was just not possible. So I had to find that balance, and I tried my best. I just remember still sitting there in the study centers and just trying to do both. I was taking phone calls, and it was funny because I would have either a future client or client, another store basically, calling me or trying to do business, and I didn't want to make sure it didn't sound like I was at a school or in a study center, but I was really trying to just juggle to do both. And then it got to a point where I had to make the decision, and I had to tell my parents that I was gonna take a break from school. Yeah, which was really difficult, but they understood, and I think they did have at least some belief that I would be able to make a go at this. And of course now, when you fast forward all these years now, they're super happy. I always said I was going to return back to school, which I didn't. But yeah.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad you explained that, because a lot of us, obviously you came to the crossroads.
Yes.
You came to a point where it was a T intersection, and you realized you have to make right or left. You had a choice to make. So you made the choice. Okay, I'm going to pursue my business. So you left it. Was it unsettling still?
It really was, because I still want, that part of me just really wanted to get that schooling out of the way and just finish that school. And then it was and when you jump into something like that, and that you can possibly have wasted 5 years of or how many years you might try to get in going and not working, that was a little bit unsettling. But the thing is, I always try to look at things like more positively. So I said, okay, what's worst case scenario? I'm still young, and I'm still young. I have so many years ahead of me in terms of career. If I need to jump back into school or find a job or do anything else or try another business if it doesn't work. But then I said, worst case, even if after all that and this does not work out, I'm sure I will have gained a lot of knowledge and learned from this. And that was one of the things where I was able to kind of balance the feeling unsettled. Was this the right thing to do? I basically thought of all the things in a more positive way, saying no matter what, and when you can almost do like a risk benefit thing, I just knew it would be okay in a ways, regardless of the outcome.
Okay, I'm glad you explained that. But let's go on with your future. So you dropped out of school.
Yep.
You've got your company. It's called Audio Distribute.
Yeah, Audio Dream Distributions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're partnered with somebody. Are you not with her right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you sort of paint a picture of what's going on with your life now? You dropped out. How are you growing this business?
Yeah, that's the one thing I knew, we couldn't just rely on that one brand.
Okay.
So of Aurel Audio, in order to make it viable for us to have a company, we couldn't just rely on that one brand. So the thing is, I knew I had to seek new manufacturers to be able to distribute. And I think that was probably one of the most difficult things, was seeking out new vendors, because but in order to grow, it was just something that was really needed. So I started going to the trade shows and just approaching other manufacturers saying, hey, can I distribute your product? And again, it was kind of like, who is, are we going to really trust this person who is 20 something years old? And maybe because I'm Asian, I looked a little bit younger then. So even for a 20 something year old, and you can tell it became really quite difficult to really move in that aspect. So what I started doing was composing a lot more proposals to manufacturers, and I remember one of the first major ones that we got was from a fairly large company at that time out there in Europe. I I wanted it so bad, so I went to the extreme, and I said, you know what, I said, I will do this. I will do X amount of volume for you. I will make sure to get this product out there. This is how we're going to go to market on this product. And then of course they said, well, we need to see your facilities. And I said, wait a minute. I'm like, at this time, I'm just operating in my parents' basement. You know, that's where to keep the cost down, I used their whole basement and everything for storage, everything. I'm like, they can't come see this. So, I mean, we're going to extreme is I was able to get a friend, actually through you, Sam, and they had this office up there just close to McLeod Trail. And they had agreed that we had actually set up that place pretty much as my operating office. So when they flew down here, and I remember even at the time, I didn't have a very nice car. I actually borrowed my friend's car to pick them up and drove them. So it was almost like a whole stage makeshift thing, but I knew I need to get brands in order to make this work, and I need to secure other brands. So it worked out amazing, because that they had a shared basically front office, almost like secretary up there, taking phone calls and stuff like that. So it looked like a full-blown operation. And we ended up actually leasing that place out after, anyways, down the road. But these were the things that I just knew I needed to propel the company.
I like the way you explain that. The way you explain this, it reminds me of a book that I read quite a few years ago called The Shoe Dog. It's the Nike story.
Okay.
And it's the same thing. They got a younger person reaching out to all these companies in Japan to sell their shoes here in North America. It sounded the same thing. Yeah. And you staged everything the way you did that.
Yeah, because that's the only way they would trust me, really. Without I know if I showed them my parents' basement, I would never have got the deal or the contract to be able to distribute that particular product.
So then you got this one contract. Should we name the company that you got, or can we? Or?
Yeah, so one of them, it was a company called BC Acoustic. They're not really as much around anymore either, which is a whole different story, but they became very successful, and they grew really quick. They grew from, when I started them, I think they had 12 employees, and they grew up to, I think, almost 50 within 5 years. Okay. And then that's a whole different thing. They hit the financial crisis and stuff like that. But yeah, BC Acoustic was one of them. Really cool speaker. And the reason why I was so intrigued with that speaker company is because they were doing things quite unique technology-wise compared to other speakers. So that was one of the second major product that we brought in.
Okay, I just want to get the audience to understand this too, of what's going on. So you're asking companies to bring equipment here to Canada.
Yeah.
Now from that, you're taking that equipment and you're going to other retailers in.
Correct.
In Canada, I'm assuming?
Yes, in Canada. And there's some stuff that we were going to start moving into the States too as well, but primarily in Canada, so it's business to business.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're basically the middleman is basically what's happening.
Yes.
And then you take basically, do you buy the equipment from them, or is it kind of like which you mentioned before earlier when you were younger and you were selling people's stuff on the flea market? Is it consignment? Is that the way it was working, or can we talk about that?
Yeah, no, it's not a problem. Yeah, we had to purchase it. We had to purchase it in full before it leaves.
Okay.
There wasn't, and I think because we were really new, we couldn't set up any terms for payment. So we couldn't even set up like a net 30 days or something like that. So we had to pay for basically everything, warehouse it. We were in charge of the marketing, especially too, is because these contracts were for full distribution and exclusive in all of Canada. So basically, as soon as it left from there, we were in charge of everything, facilitating the trade shows, marketing, reviews, everything like that to get that brand going in Canada.
I'm curious. Can we just talk about the marketing side of things a little bit? So how do you market something like this? How do you get it out to the retailers?
So during that time on the distribution side, it's so more the distribution side, or say at the audio room.
Either or, which one do you want to talk about?
So I would say
let's talk about the retailers just before you came to the audio room. How about that?
Yeah. So before the audio room for the distribution side, the thing is different then because the landscape was so different. It was mostly just still print ads back then, and social media. Remember, this is more in the earlier 2000s. Was not really present at that time, and it wasn't really a strong tool to use to market yourself. So to almost go down to traditional ways. So I would just figure out which magazines maybe that would allow us to advertise in, and the key for that too was reviews, and getting reviews out there was which I actually found that was quite difficult. Because two things either they wanted is either you had to sign some kind of advertising contract with them in order for them to publish a review for you, and which I actually don't think is right, but that's what some of the bigger magazines, those ones I won't mention, but they're really strict on that, and the ones that I would say would be willing to do it, you had to have a base of retailers before they would even do a review, because they do a review, they want to be able to know that product is to be purchased. So it's always the difficult thing. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, and so I just basically had to secure the first few stores, and then the marketing started to be coming with a lot of reviews, and just kind of picking the right spots in terms of magazines that we can actually budget for, and along with doing the trade shows. So that was more of, I would say it was more traditional in terms of marketing is what I came up during that time.
I'm glad you explained that too. That's interesting the way you put that, and that's an eye-opener on how that industry runs. I'm assuming all industries run the same way.
Yes, I would assume it's very similar.
Yeah. But at the same time, when you say traditional, and I just want to ask you about this, did you make a lot of cold calls too, just to get the gear into the stores?
Yes, actually, I decided the best thing to do was to go in person. So so anytime we can do two things at once, either go to a trade show in that area, what I would do is I would personally go visit all the dealers myself. And I thought instead of just picking up the phone to just do cold calling, I said, I think it would be best if you can really budget. And, at that time, during the earliest, I was still in school, and I'm still that broke student. So we had just a streamlined budget. We would stay at whatever, the Holiday Inn or whatever it can. But I knew I had to get myself in front of these people, and it was all talking to them in person, and just going to the store, setting up an appointment, and just saying, will you hear me out? And so yeah, so as opposed to more cold calling, I kind of just did it more kind of in person. Yeah.
I'm curious, are you introvert or an extrovert?
I would say more extrovert. I guess it depends on sometimes the mood that I'm in. But yeah, and that's the good thing is I think during that time though, I would maybe consider that more lean towards an introvert, because I was maybe just because of the confidence. The dealing with talking to that business to business. So I was maybe not as open or not as outgoing. I think during that could have been, but I had to, those are all the things that I just had to overcome.
Yeah, because I'm thinking back then, and yeah, that has to be intimidating.
Yes. Yeah.
That has to be intimidating. I mean, you're young, you're dealing with, you said you had investors that are helping you out, and you're buying expensive gear. I mean, you're putting a lot of money on the line, buying stuff, and you're trying to tell people out there saying, well, you should buy from me so you can sell this stuff in your stores, and this is good gear.
Yes.
It takes a lot of confidence to do that. And the reason I'm asking you about this, because anybody who out there is listening to this and is going, well, I can't do this. I'm nervous. I'm scared. I'm an introvert and blah, blah, blah. what I really want to emphasize here is everybody's nervous.
Yes.
It's scary for everybody, no matter what age you're at.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yep.
So, but with that said, though, too, so you're meeting all these stores, and you're building a reputation. And obviously, I'm jumping ahead to the audio room now, though, too, because you obviously set up shop here. So, can we get into that a little bit now and how that sort of developed, or is there any other special relationships that you developed?
So, other than we ended up actually securing a whole bunch of brands. I think our in the distribution side, we ended up securing another 7 brands or 8 brands that we ended up distributing. So, I guess to end that part of the distribution side, then we end up, long story short, we end up in almost every major city, including even in the extreme east and Halifax and stuff like that. So we had representation in almost everywhere throughout Canada. And then part of the reason here, so how I got into here was they were one of my clients. And it was actually this store, the audio room, that gave me my very first chance. They put the very first purchase order through, which was actually a pretty good one too. And it kind of formulated into just a really good relationship. And the thing is, I will always never forget, appreciate what they've done. And as I was learning through the distribution side, one thing I started hearing is that a lot of these traditional audio stores, they were just complaining. There's a lot of complaints saying, "Oh, the industry is not what it used to be," because the 70s and 80s, the audio industry was just booming, and even the 90s. I would say even up in, all the way up to the 90s, even going closer to the late 90s, and then we just started to see a dip, especially when the MP3 came out. And all I would hear is the doom and gloom of MP3, compressed music. That's what people only want now. There's going to be no future in audio. I actually didn't really believe that. And so it kind of sparked this thing that it was almost like, maybe I would get back into retail. And then what happened was this particular store, they fell on hard times. Peter here, who I know you've met many years ago, he unfortunately, I think, suffered from a second mild stroke. Lawrence unfortunately got sick and was terminally ill. And it was during this time I just saw the struggles that they were going through, and I said, you know what? I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just volunteer here. At that time, I had nothing of getting really involved. The back of my head were, it would be kind of cool to get back to retail, kind of like Future Shop, getting back to like how I was doing there originally at Future Shop. But I never really even thought of it. And then they, because I'll never forget what they did for me, I really just said, you know what, as long as I have a little place that I can set up my computer to do my work for my distribution side, I'll help you. And it's just, I don't have to help customers or anything like that, but just let me help you at least move boxes or do whatever you need to do. And that's kind of how it turned into here. And then eventually, because sometimes they couldn't even make it to work, or they couldn't even make it to open the store, they would call me and they're like, hey, can you open the store? And I was just like, I don't even know what to do though, like in terms of helping customers or anything like that. But and it actually happened a little bit more frequent. And then I think that's basically where their family, when unfortunately everything happened and Lawrence did pass away, the family had asked me and they said, well, do you think there's anything you can make of this place? And that's when it's kind of clicked again, thinking, hey, you know what? I kind of want to prove, like, kind of all these retailers and this doom and gloom what they're talking. Maybe this is my opportunity to partner in the store and create something about, and basically say, hey, you know what? People still want good quality music, and everything that everybody's complaining about, maybe I can show the audio industry that there is a better way.
Okay, so just to reiterate quickly, basically, the audio room here was originated by two gentlemen, Peter and Lawrence. I don't know their last names. So these two gentlemen, if I understood everything correctly from your past history as well, though, too, these two guys were just passionate about music. That's why they essentially set up the store. Yeah,
yes.
Very passionate about music. And they opened the door for you with making your, for lack of better words, making an initial purchase from you. They kind of gave you a good start for the audio.
Give me my first chance, especially when nobody else would.
Yeah. But they gave you the start, but at the same time, though, too, you're working your company, audio distribution, and I'm just before we jump ahead, can I ask you just a couple things are popping into my head. First of all, your partner did he just disappeared from audio distribution? So how did that work? Or can I ask you about that? Or
yes, yeah. So he's a good friend of mine. We actually after all this became some of the very close in terms of friends. And what happens though is I find when you enter a business and you have a 50-50 partnership, and this is where that naive part, becoming friends and doing business with, they say you shouldn't do business with friends, and especially when you're a 50-50 partner. And I did learn that way. I was, he's such a great guy. The only thing is, and we were young, and he's a little bit younger than me. He's a couple of years younger than me, a few years younger than me. So he's even younger. And so we do that business and that distribution side. And basically what happened is I was still like, go. And I completely understand because of his age and stuff like that. He still wanted to have fun, living the university life, hanging out, doing everything. And I totally get it. And it wasn't because I don't think he was good at what he does. He's a very smart guy. And he actually, at a very young age, he knew accounting quite well. And because of his family's background, he had a good business sense. It's just that it always felt like I was always like 2 or 3 steps ahead in terms of wanting to get things done. And so what we decided to do is during this part, when I decided to get involved in here, I took a step back from the distribution side. I still owned it. I still own 50%, but I did take a step back.
Okay, I'm glad I brought that up with you, because sometimes you are in a partnership where you have to sort of step away from something or not. Yeah, I'm glad you explained. Yeah. I'm glad I asked you that. But going back to the audio room itself, so you're basically working here, or not working here, you're just volunteering your time there. You had your expertise or your experience from the Future Shop, which probably helped you dealing with customers here as Peter and Lawrence were having health issues. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
And but at the same time, though, too, what was going on in the industry itself is changing as well, if I'm hearing everything right. There's a lot of pessimism in the industry, because at that time, though, too, and I'm old enough to remember this, CDs were beginning to disappear. Maybe records were disappearing as well, because streaming was just becoming the in thing. Yeah. And it looked like the industry was going to just make a sort of a right-hand turn, and sound quality was going to go downhill. But you believed in people want to hear good sound still. So you were thinking at the time, and let's just take the story off there, where Peter and Lawrence their health issues were beginning to become more predominant in their lives. And you're sitting here and you're volunteering, but you see an opportunity here.
Yes. Yeah. So after when I really thought about it, they approached me. They're like, can you make anything out of this place? And I did see the opportunity to, I guess, because of how everybody's feelings in the industry, see if I can kind of make a change and almost show exactly that people, I know it's always going to come back. Like people are going to want higher quality production in sound, and it's this whole thing with the MP3, especially because this was in the early 2000s, of really compressed music. It's just in the time being. In the future we're going to have, with larger amounts of being able to, larger bandwidth of streaming and stuff like that, we would be increasing on that. So in terms of a source, streaming was going to be the way to go, but I knew they were always going to start upping it kind of in quality. And so then what I basically did was I said, okay, I don't think I think that's going to solve itself out in terms of being a source and streaming and stuff like that. Then eventually the turntable and stuff came back into the market again. So we can really start seeing that. And then, but now it was like, how do we let audio relevant again? Because we did, during that time, we started to lose a lot of traction, especially millennial generation. They're not really interested in this kind of stuff, and or not as much as it should be. But then I said, one thing that can be changed is how we go to market and how do we reach new markets. Yeah. And so I said, you know what, I think the biggest mistake learning from all these stores in the distribution side is that they just target the people that know about audio. So they spend all this money on advertising and doing everything, especially how I used to do it too in the traditional way, but now social media is coming into play and all this kind of stuff now. They rely on the brands as their marketing tool. So they would bring in a popular brand, hoping that people will come in on that popular brand. The only problem with that is you're only targeting the people that know about audio. What about everybody else that doesn't know that there's this higher reproduction? So that guy that normally maybe would just go to that Future Shop or Best Buy, why aren't they coming here? And the way I thought of it is because they're just the audio industry is just not that relevant anymore, and it's not top of mind. People don't think of buying a higher end stereo. So, and those are one of the things I said. Well, how do I fix that, or how do I educate and figure out to bring in those kind of people that just didn't know to come into a store like this?
So can we get into that? Like, how did you do that? Can we talk about that?
Yeah. So that was so what I did was I started learning a lot on digital marketing and social media. I just started studying it. And one of my friends who's really good at this, that I met at Future Shop, and that's the thing is, Future Shop brought me a lot in terms of the people and the relationships that I met, and particularly one person, he showed me like just even a local company here in Calgary, which I it's kind of more of a small niche company. He showed me he was handling all their basically their digital marketing for them, and he showed me how much they were spending on it, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, why are they spending this much money and then on marketing and for a small little kind of niche retail shop? And then he looked at me, the numbers and the amount that they grew. So I said, you know what, I need to learn this, and this is going to be one of the things that for me to be successful and do exactly what I want to do and broaden our reach in the market, there must be something to this. So what I started doing was studying and learning how digital marketing works, all the aspects of it, and which led to the first stage of growth in the audio room.
Can I ask you more about the social media aspect?
Sure.
So what do you do? Do you put out newsletters, or do you put things on social media, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram? Do you put articles on there, or do you just put photos, or how do you attract people? I'm just or videos like this. What exactly do you do?
A combination of so at first it was mainly Google, so kind of conquering, what the basics were SEO. I was using like Google AdWords and stuff like that at that time for campaigning, and then I got into social media, and then social media, to me, it's almost like an art in terms of getting traction, figuring out with the algorithms and stuff like that, like how do you get something to go what I call semi-viral? It's so hard to make something go full viral, but it wasn't just about. And I think the biggest mistake a lot of people, especially in the earlier days, they would be like, well, I'm doing social media, because other stores would call me and say, how are you getting this traction? And they would start. And I said, well, I do social media. Well, I do that too. But then I started figuring out there's a right way of doing social media too. So I would make every post and everything purposeful, with the whole idea that will organically gain as much traction as possible.
You also mentioned a couple of minutes ago, though, too, not just music, but you also mentioned community. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So one thing for community, I said, if you build a community, it also makes a lot of people that are not enthusiasts to be a lot more approachable. And I think in anything is the people that you're around and the community that you create, especially locally for businesses, the more support you'll definitely have from that community. And what we started doing is we started working. So we would have a yearly event that now I think next year will be our 7th or 8th one. Where this event, really what it does, it's more of an open house. And in order to, and also we always did was we would combine with like a nonprofit organization, especially in music. And one thing is that would also bring in this people that obviously love music, whether it's Jazz YYC. In the last few years now we've been doing with Jazz YYC, that love music but may not know about this world and how they can take some of that better sound reproduction that they love their jazz and then take it home. And at the end of it too as well is I always, especially for musicians and anything to do with the music industry, I have a really soft spot because I know how difficult that part of the industry is. So it's a good way to kind of help them out and give back to their charity and also help build the community here. And it really has worked. And in our events now, a lot of them you'll see during the daytime that we'll have in a 6-hour period over 400 people that go through the doors. And usually our evening part will have like another 150 to 200 people that come through the doors. So
I like the way you worded that. I mean, to me, what I'm hearing it's giving back.
Yes.
It's giving back. It's because a store like this or audio, when we think about high-end audio, people could be intimidated.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I think that's what I'm trying to emphasize here is when you build a community, when you have your open houses, and when you collaborate with nonprofit and the music industry, giving back to the musicians as well and helping them out, you lower the bar in the sense of you're more welcoming. Yeah. Would that be a good way of wording it?
Yeah, welcoming. Yes, exactly. And this whole thing. I want this place to feel as welcoming as possible, and that's part of the reason why nobody here, anyone in sales here is non-commissioned. I wanted people to be selling based on what's the need of the customer, and give the best possible customer service without having commission incentives or certain spiffs that a lot of these vendors will say, hey, you sell this and you'll get, you get an extra $100, let's say, or something like that. And I just, that's kind of the norm in the industry and a lot of sales industry. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't want to incorporate that. And again, just to bring the whole welcoming factor here, because one thing else that I learned in this industry, in the distribution side, is we are plagued by almost elitism in this industry. And it is terrible. And that's why I say, no wonder why some of this, some of these people don't even want to step into the store. It's known that you come into a store like this, and you almost feel like, you're just keep your hands in your pocket kind of thing, and you just feel like you're just not being helped properly, and it's known. It plagues our industry.
Can we talk about that? How can we talk about how you deal with a client? Like if a customer comes through the door, and like me, like I'm a customer here, and how do you start? How do you start with your customer? Can you kind of give us a synopsis about how you do that?
Yeah. So usually, and I know you dealt with Marcos a lot.
Yeah.
And usually, what I tell everybody here is always, always make it, I'll ask all the questions first and all the right questions first. In normal sales, you call that qualifying during the sales process. But the main thing is really to truly ask these questions to see how it really fits into their lifestyle and into their music listening, and getting really, really personal about that. That you're truly trying to find the right speaker and the right product to fit that customer, whether it's sound or how it fits into their life is extremely important. And another thing is too as well, because we have the opportunity here, is to talk about, again, going back to the music. And the thing is, the thing with music is very personal, and it immediately opens. It it's almost like as soon as you start talking about music, it opens the door to actually becoming a more personal experience. And the thing is, once you start talking about that, the experience at the store and that connection that you have with that customer, usually because it's so personal, ends up turning into more of a friendship and that kind of relationship. So that's usually kind of especially in the initial process when we're going through our customers, really make it about how that customer is going to fit into their lifestyle and how to create it where it's really more of like a personal experience.
Yeah, music is personal. It's very personal. It's almost, when you just described it, I almost think of myself, but it's almost like a realtor when you're buying a house. It's not quite as important, but it's personal. For a lot of people, yeah, music is very personal. I mean, sitting back and enjoying music, it's becoming for lack of better words, you kind of indicated it earlier too, it became sort of a lost art, but it's coming back now. And it's personal. It strikes your heart.
It really does. And the amount of people that I've dealt with that sometimes would just let go and start crying in the listening chair. It's surprising actually how many times that actually happens. And because it is really emotional, it's really personal too. And so many my customers who I now consider friends, after, it can even be just the first time that I've met a customer, but when we really sit through and we listen to the music that they enjoy and they really find a system that just emotionally grabs them, and after they'll ask, like, can I give you a hug after? It's more than just a one-off occasion. It actually happens quite often. And I think it is, and as soon as you make that connection with that customer, it just really eases, and it makes it a lot easier for that customer to kind of to make a decision, and also to have that experience of getting away from that technical and elitism and stuff like that. So
But I just want to segue a little bit, because I want to talk a little bit more about the store, because speaking of just appealing to the general public, you've built a really neat store here with the sense of your staff, because your staff is pretty diverse. You've got some diverse people here with really diverse backgrounds. How did you go about doing that, and how did that build? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was kind of like me doing everything. Of course, at the start, and one of the original ones that started working here, he was a customer, and a lot of these, actually quite a few of them are customers. That's how it started. And he was a customer because of his passion. He didn't have a sales background. He actually had more in the drafting. Like drafting and design stuff. That's what he was doing, but he's a long-term customer here, and he ended up just kind of wanting to work in this industry, and he was one of the first. And that's kind of similar how it happened. And even like with Greg himself, carpenter background, incredible woodworking that he does, but he has always had such a big passion for audio, and he turned that into his own business prior, doing custom cabinetry to say, if you want a thing to look like the old Roman Empire kind of room, he can create that, and he can create that. And he was actually one of the first that I reached out and say, hey, can we work together? And then there's Marcos. He's another customer too as well, who's excellent computer programming background. But originally how he started was, he was a customer here, and I knew what he was taking in school. And originally he was supposed to do all the development of the digital marketing stuff, websites and all that kind of stuff. That was supposed to be his goal. But it morphed into him now dealing more with one-on-one with customers, which I actually think this is more of his calling. This is more of his thing. Him dealing more of the customer side as opposed to doing the software development and stuff like that side, and it's or websites and all that kind of stuff. you can tell he prefers to do this anyways.
He is. Wow. A couple more questions. I just want to, because I know time's running on, but what do you see for the future for this store and for audio? And I know you guys do home theater as well.
Yeah.
But what do you see the future?
Yeah, I would say for the future audio, I think it's just getting stronger, for one thing, as an industry in general. You know, when you see the growth just in the turntable market alone, you know, we thought that was a fad, like that was just going to be just a fad that was just going to fly by. It hasn't been. It's not stopping, and if anything, it keeps growing. So that's good. It's fueling that younger generation, because it's more the teenage generation right now that's actually kind of getting into that, and then which is good for a store like us. And just actually this morning, somebody sent me that in 2024, 2023, the growth of the audio industry, particular in the higher end audio industry, grew something about 8%. Yeah, in the last bit, it's one of the largest growth in a very, very long time in the audio industry. So there's definitely a future for this, and I think anything kind of more in that I would say more of that luxury thing is, so in terms of the industry, because the way I think of it in more of the, say, luxury or higher end experience, more boutique retailing, because people are going to have what they're going to want in the future is, it's almost going to be like no service or full service. You know, so I think industries like this can really capitalize on the way that the markets are going just in general. And in terms of the store, yeah, it's can really feed on that. I think I don't really see the store, and no, I don't think I want to grow this any further in terms of the audio room to today. I think where it's at is a good, healthy spot. You know, we can maybe just have normal organic growth, but other than that, of really fully expanding it, we can, but I actually don't think I would want to. Part of the reason why, to me, because I love this so much and it's such a big passion that I have, I don't, and it's never felt a burden. I don't want it to become that way. So in terms of this business, I want to keep it just, you know, it's still like my baby, and you still want to nurture it. But the thing is, I want to always keep this part basically fun, and always have just, and keep that passion going for that. And I don't want to, because, you know, there becomes sometimes a point where you lose a little bit of that. When you get to a certain size or anything like that. So I think kind of keeping it and maintaining it for now is kind of where I want to go, and work on other projects in this audio industry.
What I'm hearing from you, if I'm not mistaken, is quality over quantity.
Yes, yeah, and that's a good way to.
I think you provide a good product or good products, and you provide a good service to help people, and you want to be able to maintain that. If you grew too much, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think for my own personal well-being, I think that I just wouldn't enjoy it as much. If I couldn't, and, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know if I couldn't provide that service and that experience to the customers anymore, and our staff can't do that, then I know myself, I just wouldn't be fulfilled, and I would actually probably end up just not being happy in this industry.
Okay. Yeah. Let's just recap quickly, because you grew up in Calgary, essentially, in a Filipino home. You grew up with strong family values and, well, a lot of people around you. But having said that, though, too, you had a niche for entrepreneurship. And that was basically from your parents, because your parents were trying a bunch of different things, and you sort of had that niche. And as you were going through junior high, you kind of learned how to be the middleman. You kind of learned how to sell things, for a lack of better words. But at the same time, though, too, you had an interest. Well, definitely you mentioned you had an interest in fishing, which is kind of interesting because it's really different from audio. But you did have a passion for music, but more particularly for audio itself, for audio equipment. But you decided, coming out of high school, you decided to approach Mount Royal University because you had a technical mind and you sort of had that business mind. You were thinking about maybe start doing something. Well, let's just rephrase this. You want to do something with business, but you approached computer science first. And you realized about the second year into computer science at Mount Royal that it wasn't for you. It was just hanging over a computer and writing code all day wasn't for you. So you just had to switch, and you just had to pursue music more, or business more, I should say. But as you did that too, you had the opportunity to start dabbling in the audio industry, and you had a friend who had an uncle that gave you the opportunity to sort of get into that industry, and from that, you developed a business called Audio Distribution.
Yeah, Audio Dream. Yeah.
Audio Dream Distribution. Yeah. Okay. So, and basically you were the middleman with that, just bringing in audio equipment and selling it out to the retailers. But having said that though too, you did that for a number of years, but while you were doing that, a place called the Audio Room gave you your first opportunity to set up gear here in Calgary. Yes. And you maintained business with these people, or Peter and Lawrence, that were the originators of that. But because of health reasons and whatnot, they sort of started stepping aside from the business. And I forgot to mention that you worked at the Future Shop as well when you were in high school and going to Mount Royal for a little while, I think it was. Yep. And that's where you sort of gained your retail experience in the audio industry as well. So you took that experience and you just basically helped Peter and Lawrence out. But as they were becoming sicker and they wanted to step away from the business more, you saw an opportunity here to maybe step into this business. And at the same time, what was happening, if I remember everything right, was there was a lot of pessimism in the industry. Mm-hmm. The industry was changing. It was going more digital, MP3 files and whatnot. Sound quality, people were kind of complaining that sound quality was going to drop off. The need for stereos or high-end audio gear was maybe going to disappear, and you felt that was not right. So you saw an opportunity with the Audio Room, so you became one of the owners. Essentially, yes. Is what ended up happening. And you described to us how you did build this business up to what it is right now. Two things. Have I missed anything that you would like to add? And the other thing I would like to ask is, in conjunction with that, is what have you really learned that you would like to pass on to the listener or the viewing audience? Basically with anybody who would maybe want to get into this type of industry, or is just listening in, somebody who's young or maybe in middle age who's thinking maybe a career change or doesn't even know how to get their career off. What have you learned that you would like to pass on?
Yeah, so first, anything that I probably, anything that I could have missed, I think you've actually captured pretty much everything. I guess it's some of the stuff that I said, if you want to put in there that you can almost validate, is that so during when implementing all that marketing and all that stuff, it actually, in the first 5 years, it actually led us to, from the Calgary Business Commerce, actually led us to do a breakout business for one of the fastest growing companies. Okay. Because we grew, in the first 5 years, we grew about 470% within the first 5 years. And that's because of implementing everything that I had thought of in the digital marketing and all that kind of stuff. So, okay. Yeah, and in terms of experience, we were also the finalist, and we actually pretty close to winning it for People's Choice Award from the Calgary Business Commerce. And now consecutively, I think for Consumer Choice, we have won 7 years in a row. So everything that about the customer experience and all that stuff in terms of on the business side of even growing the company in digital marketing, it actually, even on numbers perspective, it actually came about. So the thing is, I guess what we're doing, hopefully has been working. Yeah. So.
Then it has been. Well, I'm glad you shared that. Any other career advice or tips that you would like to pass on to somebody who's maybe in university, who's maybe at the crossroads like you were? Any suggestions or tips that you could offer to someone like that?
I think somebody is to take risk, and I just, if I always tell people, one thing I always tell people, if they ask me like, I want to do this and I want to do that, but they say I can't, I can't because of this, this, and this, and I said, your mindset has to change. It's either if this is what you want to do, then you basically have to do it. And all these risks that you're coming up with right now, why you can't do it, and these excuses, basically, you kind of, if you want to be able to do that, your mindset has to completely change, and then you just have to go for it. And the one thing that I always tell people is make things about your relationship, and really look. It's the connection of people, whether it's business to business, business to consumer, and who you meet in this world is probably one of the most important things. And to focus your success by building relationships will lead you to greater success. And another one thing I always have to say is a little bit, I don't want to say a little harsh, but the thing is, in life, one thing I hate is excuses.
Yeah, let's talk about the mindset, because as somebody just pointed out, a lot of us are raised to be consumers. There's a consumer mindset. And to me, consumers, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm out to lunch on this one though too, but people look at it as a means to end. Everything's a means to an end.
Yes.
You built a business, and your story here, and on my podcast, what I try to emphasize is everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a journey. Mm-hmm. And the journey is not linear. It's not just straight up and down. Even with yours, there's been a lot of up and downs and all that. So when we talk about business mindset, or when you're going to a business and you're encouraging people to develop a business mindset, is the one thing I'm hearing, or at least one thing I'm hearing from you, is it's been up and down, but it's been a journey, has it not?
Yes. Yeah. It's been. Yeah. It's and sometimes it's even the journey that's also like just as rewarding too as well. Like the steps and this. It's like it almost feels like you're just going down this path and you just keep building and building, kind of like upon that. That's really what excites me, is the whole journey and the whole, I think, building process. I think for me is, I think one of the main things is why I really enjoy it, and going to the whole mindset thing is, and what I mean by that too is it really takes, it takes a really certain mindset. And it's weird because one thing that I think that in school, in post-secondary, if that's the path you decide to go right, is almost like the preparation and the psychological stuff of business. Because the thing is, when you jump into it, nobody can really prepare you for that. And you really have to take that whole thing of saying like no excuses, and kind of that mindset that says, you know what, I'm just gonna do it, and I'm just gonna make this thing work. And the difficulty to make it work, that's the one part that I don't think people are really prepared for. And when you, like for me, I still remember when I first started, because I had limited funds. I'm not getting paid at this time, especially doing the distribution part, under Audio Dream Distributions. And I was calculating, my friends say, do you want to go for coffee? And I would be even like, I think about it, like, I can't. Even that drive that will cost maybe, $2 in gas to meet you for coffee, and to buy the coffee now, I just can't do it. And that's the thing, is to really change your mindset, that you really got to prepare yourself and have the preparation and the willingness to go through to make it work with no excuses is probably one of the difficult things that you got to do, is to really kind of shift that and prepare yourself for that, in order just to make it through a self-employed or business career.
Do you think your life, because as you're describing this, I'm thinking about your life, especially in your early years, the way you told me your parents were immigrants, and I know my parents were immigrants as well, though, too. So immigrants come here with, literally next to nothing. Yeah. So you understand that mentality of, okay, you've got to be careful with your money. That's an essential thing. But you also said, though, too, building relationships. And what strikes me, and maybe I'm wrong about this, I want to hear what your thoughts are, is when you grew up a family, a lot of people around you all the time, and that's core. But when you have 11 people living in a small house, you have to build relationships. You have to get along with people.
Yes.
And that struck me, though, too, is just the way you worded that in your business, though, too. You build relationships. You build relationships with people. You build a community where people are willing to support the business. Would that be, am I reading that right? Or
yes. Yeah. And having that support because of my, and that's the one thing is, even going back to my parents and seeing their community of the people that they came here, even like living together, and how my dad always enforced, like, just, keep in contact with your friends, build that community of people that there to have support. And because a lot of times you might find that one person that you might have befriended, or someone there in family that might, lead you somewhere that you might be able to use their services and maybe get into their network or anything like that. And by building quite a strong foundation with that, can really help like business in the future. And,
well, I don't know your parents, but I think you've probably surpassed them.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. My dad has done in his career, to tell you, has done very well. And considering his story, kind of doing what he did, he just, of course, this doesn't have to go on this more because off topic, but let's just say he employed so many of my friends. He basically what he did was he ended up having a construction and cleaning company, and for like construction cleanup. So say in all kinds, commercial cleaning, and also as well as like say there's a condo construction cleanup, they would tear everything down, come in there and do all the cleanup and stuff like that. And it's really cool. I'll tell the story. Of course, this doesn't have to go on there, but for my dad, how he actually got his first contract that got started is he went into this medical, and going back, he got a university background, and he was a university professor and taught a lot of doctors and stuff like that too. And I remember he told me the story. He was going door to door, again, just to change his life. He's like, you know what, I need to get back into business. And he's like, I just need to do something, because of course his doesn't matter how certified his credentials are back home, you can't use that here. So he's like, hey, I gotta do something different. But what's really neat is he got out there, opened up this company, and he walked into this medical center and said, do you guys need any services or anything like that? And they're like, no, we're good. And he's like, oh, do you mind if I take a look around? So my dad took a look around, and he saw a lady there, kind of puzzled, couldn't figure out or diagnose something. She was looking under the microscope. And my dad was like, oh, what are you doing? It was like, you look like a little puzzled. Yeah, I was like, I can't figure this out. My dad was like, do you mind if I have a look? So my dad has a look, and he looks down, and he's like, oh, this is blah, 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 whatever. I can't. And the thing is, my dad can memorize all the Latin names of bacteria, everything. It's incredible. And she's like, really? And she's like, my dad's like, you know how you would know? She's like, if you do this, this, and this will prove that my diagnosis is right. So she did. She's like, oh my goodness, you're right. And then my dad's like, oh, now, will you? He's like, now would you entertain the idea of me? Because like I know everything about bacteria, how to keep the place sanitary, all that kind of stuff. So the owner agreed to talk, and then he ended up doing, I would say, 70% of all the medical centers, like the contractors in all of Calgary. and it kind of blossomed, and then it blossomed from there into a very, very successful business. Then my dad started getting heavily into like investing and investments, and just completely, it's incredible what he did. So that's a really cool story on its own. But yeah.
And I say that to people. I say that too. It's again, going back to when I used to work at the university, people get so pigeonholed. They think there's only one way of doing something, and that's sort of what I was alluding to before we started this. Is just keep an open mind. Like your dad just went in there, but he saw a bigger picture. He just looked at the bigger picture.
Yes.
And he just made it. When your dad walked in there initially into the health place, he presented something to him, and they said no. But then he said, "Let me look around." But he looked at with the lens wide open.
Exactly.
And he saw an opportunity. Maybe he didn't even see an opportunity. He just suggested something.
Yes.
And from that, it just spiraled into something else.
Yeah.
It's just you and me. I mean, the way we're having this conversation, it could just, things just spiral out into a lot of different things. It's just keeping that open mind. That's all. People just get so focused. And I think going back to what you were saying before about consumerism, a consumer mindset to a business mindset, I think a business mindset is open. Mm-hmm. You're always looking for opportunities.
Because you're exactly right. Keeping open to that and solving problems is always one of the biggest things. And that's what I'm saying, keeping open yourself to the world, whether it's relationships, whether it's ideas, and just seeing that big picture, seeing everything open. And you're right, because there's so many different ways, and there's different ways to really get there. But if you're not open, and I always go back to these excuses about having that mindset, is because when you're not open and you have excuses, you just close yourself off.
Yeah.
And when you close yourself off, there's always a reason why you can't do something. So that pathway, you're never even going to journey out of that path to maybe take that other different pathway.
As far as digital marketing is concerned, I mean, I asked you about the future, about the audio industry. But I'm also curious because you said, and I believe this, that your industry or your store is really growing because of digital marketing. How do you see that? How do you see that particular type of marketing or that particular industry growing? What do you see for that?
I think for that, it's going to be really involved, and there's a lot of stuff that AI is going to take over there. I think the importance of digital marketing is still going to keep escalating. The thing is, now that everybody's getting into it, naturally the competition is going to rise on that. And a big thing is what's going to really change is in a lot of the software and stuff will be the introduction of like AI and stuff in that model. And one thing is what this industry needs is it really needs to capture that, because we're not capturing our industry. Most of them don't know how, and the majority of them don't know how. They don't know anything about digital marketing. And it's really unfortunate. I think that's part of the reason what's really keeping this industry now, and keeping this industry, the awareness of industry, not as where it should be, is because that. It's the lack of knowledge of digital marketing. It's also, or the saying that I don't need to do that. I need to, that's kind of that older mentality of thinking where I don't need to do that. But I think it's really needed for our industry. And that's why I'm hoping actually in the future, what I want to be able to do is figure out a way to actually help other stores like us, if they're willing and open to it, and manufacturers and stuff like that, of really how to conquer that side of the digital marketing, because it's really much needed in our industry for sure.
I'm curious about digital marketing because we're becoming we are an information age. And I want to ask, but like, for example, like your industry specifically, audio, it's pretty easy to bring up YouTube, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I mean, not just yours, but there's so many audio reviews out there. How does a consumer really understand what's fact and what's really relevant fact, as opposed to what's just really misleading information? Do you want to talk about that? Or
yeah, like, so looking more stuff that I would say, look for the people that you're in anything, in any industry, that are looking for a more objective way of doing processes or whatever. You can tell when they're a little bit maybe more biased or too subjective, but being more like more objective way of thinking. And I think that's why, even though we haven't released that much on the YouTube, for us as well, but the reason why we got some decent traction on that during that time was because a lot of this stuff is that we did stuff that's a little bit more relatable and a little bit more, tried to be as objective as possible. So it's straight and clear, like when we're measuring the output of an amplifier and measured by sound pressure level, which people can use that as a tool of measurement, it was kind of straight like, okay, this one is definitely has more objectively by testing has more sound pressure than this product. And by doing that, where the regular non-enthusiast can relate was kind of one thing that I went after. And I wanted to be one of the very few channels that were definitely, there's more of an objective approach of why things might sound a certain way or something like that, as opposed to being very subjective. Where in audio, I think there's just too much. Everybody, it's just their opinion, which is really tough because everybody's opinion is what you like is quite different. So I think navigating that, especially in the audio world, is really difficult. As opposed, like cars, you can make it super objective, like throw it on the track, see what it does on the track, see what the quarter mile times are, and all that kind of stuff. Really kind of measure on that way. But because the audio is so subjective, so in this audio industry, what I recommend people is, unfortunately, in this information world, I would say is you need to go in there and kind of trust your own ears, and the people that you do rely on or you do look upon for information is someone that maybe takes a little bit more objective approach to it, and as opposed to saying, that only this kind of sounds good, or like, for me, I only like this, but it's not really explaining why a particular customer might like that. And that's the thing that I tried to do in the best possible way, was to be like, what, I can see why a customer might like this one over this, as opposed to be like, I just like this particular product, because it's going to be different for everybody.
As you said earlier in this interview, music is really personal. Trust your own ears.
Yes.
That's something that's really relevant to this industry, opposed to like the car industry, where you can actually measure it.
Yeah, there's a lot more measurements, and the one thing to add to that too as well, believe me, because I worked in the distribution and manufacturing side of audio for a decade. The world in way, especially when reviewers really get up there, it could be print magazine. I know it's happening in the YouTube world. It becomes very biased, because now it's advertising dollars speak, sponsorships speak, and that's the problem, and that's the one thing that I actually couldn't stand in the industry, even the print stuff, all the stuff. And I don't want to name names of magazines. I dealt with all the major ones. It actually really put me off, because it was always something, which it was always an incentive for them. They always made it about like the business side, how they're going to profit from this, but there's always palms being greased. And so that's the thing. Even taking to the YouTube world, you always got to be careful.
I'm curious though too. I can talk about this all day.
Yeah.
But even when we go to something like Amazon or Google reviews, do you think we rely on those too much, and we don't trust ourselves enough to say, okay, even a book that you may want to read or go see a movie or whatnot, there may be a lot of people that like it or not like it, but if you're interested in it, maybe you should just go watch it or read it or whatnot.
I agree. Yeah, so I definitely too that they can provide a good guideline, especially because they're customer reviews. In the audio world though, and I don't know why it is, this one sometimes I see be careful what you even read from customer reviews from Amazon and stuff like that too as well, because audio industry is really funny. Is because everybody likes to assume that they know a lot more than maybe they actually do. It's something that I don't know what it is in our hobby, but everybody is an expert, and it's more stronger. It happens that to all industry, but in ours, it's even worse. And I don't know, for some reason, we're one of the very few industries that like to, either there's online reviews, forums, they like to put down other brands. It's almost like if you're writing a personal review and you own it, it's the best thing in the world, and everything else is not great. And if you read most of the reviews, it always seems to be like that. Like even for customer reviews, here we're quickly, like for example, you take two known brands, like say Kef and Focal, which are two pretty strong brands in our market industry. You will have people saying, well, Kef, they absolutely are garbage. You're going to have that camp. And you're going to have these other people saying, Focal is absolutely garbage, or both of them are garbage, or anything like that. And how can you like that product? And they will poo-poo and hate on a product. It's funny because in our industry, it's a lot more stronger. If you take a look at in the car industry, or even the watch industry, for example, any of these more enthusiast or hobby industries, when you take a look at yes, you're always going to have that people, but it's a lot less prominent. You rarely have people saying, well, Porsche really sucks. You don't hear that as much in the car industry, or you don't have so many people saying Rolex is garbage, or that's garbage. But in our industry, that's the one thing I have to say, we're unfortunately a little bit plagued with that, where it's just so polarizing, and people are quickly just to dismiss products or saying products are not that great, whether because maybe they don't own that product or anything like that. But it just, in our industry, it seems to be a little bit worse that way.
Yeah, because it's so personal. Music is so personal. That's why I think.
Yeah.
But with that, I really want to thank you. I really want to thank you for the time this morning, Kurt. I really, really appreciate it. We covered your history of your career, and I already gave us a synopsis about it. But from all the way from growing up with a big family to going to Mount Royal, discovering music, being passionate about audio, and how you went about your journey. And your journey hasn't been straightforward. It's been a lot of ups and downs, back and forth. But you definitely are very passionate about audio. It comes out loud and clear in this interview. And you've given tons of advice on for people who may be looking for a career or how to develop your career, because it's clear if you're passionate about something, you'll make it work. That's for sure. So I really, really want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you for the fact of you gave us a good rundown or a good history of the audio industry, for the music industry, and how that's evolved as well. So I think the listener whether they're watching or listening, I think can really appreciate the time well spent.
And thank you. And I would like to really thank you as well. What was I going to say? Yeah, so it's quite amazing. It was great. It was great talking to you, because especially as a customer here, and knowing the history even before I probably was involved in this place, to again sort of say about relationships, to kind of like come back, and for us to be talking today it means a lot. Yeah, I loved it. So,
okay, I appreciate it. Thanks very much. Yeah, it's about relationships, about building relationships, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to thank Kurt for letting me share his story with us. I really appreciated his time and his efforts. Some key lessons that are worth mentioning from the interview are: Kurt encountered the crossroads quite a few times in his career, as he explained. His message was simple. He just listened to himself. He followed his gut feelings. His understanding of audio and the industry was established early on working in retail at the Future Shop. As time went on, his experience grew, but it was the foundations that helped him the most. Learn the basics no matter what you do. He made it quite clear of what he wants to do with his store and how he wants to grow it. Become clear of what you want to do. He understood how to build community, and it is about giving back. His big advice is not to make excuses, rather to develop the mindset of wanting to overcome obstacles as they appear. And they do, and they will. With that, once again, I want to thank Kurt for this informative and inspiring interview. And a big thanks to Sam from 404 Creative LBC for recording and editing this session. Please tune in for the next episode for The Career Guy, where I am talking to Scott Ivers from Ivers Guitars. A life in IT to making guitars. Also, for other interviews and blogs, please visit the Career Guy website, www.thecareerguy.ca, and thanks for listening.